We've had the EV for almost 6 months now, and we've done 10,000 Ks. So that's on track for our typical year's driving, which is about 25,000 Ks a year. So I want to do a real world review about our experience in an EV. Been some good points and some bad points, and there's just so much misinformation out on the internet now. I thought I'd just do a little video just to show my experience with it. So here we go. So for this video, I'm going to drive down the beach. The reason I'm using that as an example is that at summertime, I love going to the beach. It's about a 60k return trip to get to our good southern beaches. So if you look at $2 a litre, 60k's return, it costs $12 to go to the beach, plus all that pollution. But now with the EV, I can go just to the beach on this awful day just for the hell of it, because it's going to cost me $0. Oh, it might cost me 10 cents. So, yep. So I thought we'd go to the beach and I'll get some little cutaways. So that's where we're off to. As I said in my intro, or I think I said in my intro, there's been some good aspects to the EV and some sort of, I guess, initially disappointments of an EV. So I'm going to go over both of those. So I'm going to start with the good. I've turned into a complete bogan. This thing just accelerates like nothing I've ever been in before. Now, I'm not a car person, so I've had nothing to compare it to. But in all my research, this is getting 0 to 100 in just over 4 seconds. So it's up there with Ferraris and Porsches and, all those sort of cars. And everyone, when you take in it and do a little acceleration, they just love it. It's just like there's been people screaming in the car and everything. And this isn't even fast compared to some of the high-end Teslas. So, in terms of the performance, it's just, it's really good fun. And when we drove to Melbourne, overtaking cars, you can't wait to come up behind a car to overtake it. It just grabs the road like you can't imagine. So that's a really positive point. The driving experience, it's fast, it's smooth, there's no gear changes. So you get back in the old Subaru and it just seems so clunky, whereas this thing's just mental, basically. Now, a lot of the internet forums say that they're really inconvenient. You've got to plug in to charge, yada, yada, yada. It's no hassle at all charging. There's basically 3 ways we charge. The first one is just at home. You plug it into the power at home, and overnight you'll get a good chunk of charge. I've spoken to other EV users, and what they do is they get an off-peak rate, like 10 cents. The wind doesn't blow all the time, or the sun doesn't shine at night, as all the people say, but the wind tends to blow all the time. In the middle of the night, no one needs that power, so you can get really good off-peak rate. So we can probably charge a full tank in the EV for $2 or $3 overnight. So that'll give us a whole week's driving. And of course we can charge off our solar, which is just the feed-in rate, 5 or 6 cents a kilowatt. So we can charge the car for 50 cents or $1. So it's not free, but I mean, it is so close to free, it's not even funny. The other way we charge is, and now I admit that this will change, this is because there's not a lot of EVs, we can park in town, in the middle of town. We can park for 2 hours for free and typically get a free charge, or maybe spend $1 charging. So we get 2 hours prime parking, which would normally be $12, I don't even know anymore, for free. So that's super handy. Then we got the fast chargers. So we drove to Melbourne and that was an absolute breeze. So you pull up at Keith and plug in, go grab a coffee, something to eat, come back, and within 30 minutes you're ready to hit the road again. So we needed to do 3 stops going to Melbourne. We normally do 2 anyway, so yeah, an added extra half hour, but we probably saved, I don't know, is it 1.5 tanks to get to Melbourne? So let's say $200. So we spent probably $60 because the fast charging is more expensive. But so that extra half hour stop, we saved $140, and yeah, we just had 1 extra stop. Got to see Ballarat. The cost of an EV is probably the biggest hurdle for people at the moment. And for us, it was huge. We don't normally spend this much money on a car, but we just, both Ange and I are sort of committed to doing whatever we can to reduce our carbon footprint. So, especially me, you know what I've become like, quite sort of passionate about it. So, when we did the maths, it wasn't too bad. Pretty much you're spending in this particular car an extra $25,000 on top of the internal combustion engine version to get the battery. Now, as I said, we're driving 25,000 k's a year at $2 a litre, 1 litre per 100. That's costing us about $4,000 a year. So over the life of this car, now we get a battery guarantee for 8 years. So for 8 years, if this battery doesn't keep more than 80% of its charge, we get a brand new battery. So for the next 8 years, we basically drive for free, saving $4,000 a year. So 4 times 8, what's that? 36,000, I think. So the cost of the battery around about 25. So for our circumstances, this car's actually saving us money. Not only that, at the end of it, instead of burning $36,000 worth of petrol, which is worth nothing and puts in, I think, 3.6 million litres of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, we end up with some sort of retained value in the car by not burning that. So for the kilometres we're doing, it's making perfect financial sense, which is part of the reason we went to the bank and got the loan to get it. So yeah, that's another real positive for us. On the battery warranty, as I said, we get 8-year guarantee. Now, worst case scenario, let's say at the end of the 8 years, our range is dropped by half. 95% of our driving is still around town, so we could still use the car for another 10 years and maybe not do really long trips in it, but just use it as a run around, go to the shops, go to Victor Harbour, go to the Barossa, those sort of trips. Once again, another 10 years, no petrol, so brilliant. Who cares if it does lose some of its charge, which it looks like it will. But in the big scheme of things, it isn't even an issue for us. Now, on the battery recycling, there's a lot of misinformation getting sprouted around about, the batteries. The lithium-ion batteries are really recyclable, and as we get more and more EVs, there's going to be industries around that. So, yep, you've got the initial cost of getting all that lithium out of the ground, carbon cost I'm talking about there, but we can recycle that in 10 or 12 years' time, and our second battery is going to be net cost of maybe a quarter of the initial battery in terms of carbon pollution. So once again, the Sky News arguments and all the false information you see on the internet is just doesn't stack up. And what also doesn't stack up is follow the money. Oh, it's just a green conspiracy. For God's sake, it's free to drive. For the next 16 years, I don't have to go to the petrol station. How much money is that saving? So this follow the money thing, I'm using my own free solar. It's just the worst argument anyone's ever come up with. Follow the money. Oh my God. It's follow the money straight to the fossil fuel companies. That's the reality of it for sure. The other thing I really like about it is every kilometre you drive in an internal combustion engine, you're putting about 120 litres of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So if you're going to drive 100 kilometres, you're putting, what's that, 1,200 litres, or I think it's 12,000. It's an absolute shit ton of carbon dioxide that you're putting into the atmosphere. You multiply it by the hundreds of millions of cars around. You can see why it's a real issue. So yeah, once you've got the car, yep, you've got a carbon cost to make the car, acknowledge that. But over the lifetime of the car, and I'll put a little slide up on the screen now, you're looking at about 10% the carbon cost once again of a normal car. So yeah, it's just another stupid argument by these anti-EV people. Now there's some other myths going around, like, oh, if it's cold it doesn't perform as well. Well, I mean, I've driven this over winter, and I've driven to Crafers, and Crafers at the middle of winter is slightly colder than Siberia, I expect. We didn't notice any difference. Maybe it only makes it faster than some Porsches, not all Porsches, but it's just another stupid argument. Maybe if you live in Iceland, it has to be a consideration, but in Australia, there's just not that conditions, is there really? Except, as I said, for Crafers. But other than that, you're not going to notice it. We haven't noticed it. It's an absurd thing to be saying, really, as a reason not to get an EV in Australia. So, yeah, once again, just utter nonsense that gets sprouted all the time on socials. Okay, so I have to admit there has been some issues, mainly around, in fact, only around range. Other than that, we're extremely happy. So this car's rated 420 Ks. When I got the car, I thought, brilliant, Melbourne one stop, happy days. But the reality is you don't get 420. We get probably, I haven't actually worked it out, but our real range is probably somewhere around the 360, 370 mark. So that takes a big chunk out of the 420. But this is where it really hurts. You generally only charge the battery up to 80% or maybe 90%, because it's not good for the battery and it's just really hard. I don't know if you can even charge it to 100%. And you don't want to be turning up somewhere at 5% or 2% or 3%. So we like to get somewhere with 20 or 23% in the tank. So that gives us a real driving range of somewhere around, I'd have to guess, 250, 260 kilometres. So we can drive from Adelaide to Keith and get there at about 23, 24%. Then when we drove through to Horsham, we were maybe at 30%, Ballarat. So it's no real problem, but when you think, oh yeah, I'm going to get 420, no, you're not going to get 420. You know, we get 260, which puts us into problems if we want to get to Port Hughes and back in one trip, which is a sort of a 400k return trip. We're not going to be able to do that. And our stupid government has got no charging infrastructure whatsoever north of Adelaide. That's another problem we've had. Driving from here to Melbourne, the fast chargers are brilliant. There's fast chargers in the Barossa. You don't really need the one in the Barossa, but it's sort of nice to go and charge at. But north of that, nothing at Port Wakefield, which is a major hub, nothing at Port Augusta, nothing on Yorks. Oh, there's one at Ardrossan, and there's a few little Tesla chargers. And when we first ordered the car 12 months ago now, the initial rollout was supposed to be done, but there's just nothing north of Adelaide. It's embarrassing. So we've still got to drive our Subaru if we're going to do longer trips, but that will change. And the other thing everyone goes on about, oh, how are we going to charge all the cars? There's going to be so many. And they've actually got a point at the moment. If everyone switched to EV straight away, yeah, the infrastructure is just going to jam up. But in the future, when more cars come on board, what I can see happening is, you know, you drive through to Port Augusta and little cafes will be booming because, okay, they can become petrol stations. You don't need to buy petrol, you just need to buy power. So there's going to be a whole industry around charging EV. So you'll go to a cafe, they'll make money off you charging, you'll save money off petrol. So it's going to be win-win. But yeah, it isn't going to be the landscape we see now. And if everyone was to get an EV tomorrow, it would be an absolute disaster. But as we get more and more, the infrastructure will change. The other thing we were concerned of, we drove to Melbourne, which was so easy, so nice. But if the chargers at Keith, there's 3 chargers at Keith, if that had been down, we would have been absolutely stuck. So the infrastructure is so sporadic at the moment that you can have problems like that, yeah, and it is a concern because every now and then a charger will be down. But once again, as the number picks up and it becomes commercially viable, that isn't going to be an issue at all. And on that, we've found we've done the 10,000 Ks now. 95% of our driving's just around town. You know, that includes little trips to Victor, trips like to the beach that I'm doing now, Barossa Valley, McLaren Vale, all these little outings we like to do. We just charge at home with those ones. We don't have to worry about charges at the destination. It's only the super long trips that you need to worry about that. So 95% of people are going to be charging at home, which is going to the Shaheens are going to hate it. I mean, it is going to kill them. Once again, follow the money. I mean, we've driven 10,000 kilometres in this now, and we have spent $100 because the fast charges going to Melbourne were more expensive. So 10,000 kilometres has probably cost us, let's say, $200. So follow the money. It's not going to electric vehicles, people. It's going to fossil fuels. Just have a little bit of think time if you think that's a valid argument. So, yeah. Now, I was reading Ben Fordham's post. He posted that, he did a road trip to Goulburn or somewhere, and they had to stop every 80 kilometres, and it's a joke, and yada yada. Who's stopping every 80 kilometres to charge? I mean, maybe you had a first version Nissan Leaf that's had the battery tanked or something, but I mean, as I said, we're getting 240, 260. Some of the Teslas are getting 500 plus, but he used that as a reason not to get it. You got to stop every 80 kilometres. Once again, that's bad journalism because it doesn't explain both sides of the story or both arguments. It just shows the one perspective, which, as I've learnt at uni, is biased journalism. You can have an opinion, but you need to properly present all sides of the argument and discuss them, not hide some sides. Like, they're hiding the fact that people are getting 500 Ks, we're getting 260, 270, maybe 300 and something around town. So it's, once again, complete rubbish. Now, one thing is really funny when you tell people that you've driven to Melbourne and you had to stop 3 times. Oh, 3 stops. Oh, I drive to Melbourne and back without any stops because so, who drives to Melbourne without stopping? It's 8 hours in the car. I mean, you're going to need a toilet break at some stage and possibly a lunch break. Unless you're a truck driver up to your eyeballs on no days, you're probably going to have a bit of a break at some stage. And people say, stopping's a real problem, you've got to charge all the time. But I see this being a real boom for rural economies. Like, we're driving past the signs at Dimboola, and I realised that there's a little river in there. It's probably cute. I wonder what it looks like. But you don't bother going in there because it's off the track, etc., etc. But I had a sign, come to on the roadside, Dimboola Cafe, cheap EV charging, good for couches and coffee. We go, oh shit, we'll stop there. We'll duck in and charge there instead of giving the money to the petrol station. We'll go and give money to cafes and charge up. So I think the whole infrastructure is going to completely change, and it's going to be better. It's going to be more democratic, I guess. The petrol stations have a real monopoly at the moment. So yeah, just more bad arguments. Okay, so in summary, are we happy with purchasing an EV? 120%. As I said, for the next 8 years, we don't have to spend money on petrol. And with the amount of driving I do, I anticipated I would have spent $40,000 on that. Yep, there's a bit of a nasty upfront cost, but our payments at the moment are our petrol costs. So, and we've got a much nicer car than we'd normally have. So, and 95% of our driving's around town, which is similar to most people. So range isn't an issue at all. Unless you've got a specific need and you're doing long trips all the time and you've got a caravan and all those sort of things, yep, an EV mightn't be for you at this stage, but 95% of people, it's just going to be brilliant. Unless you like giving money, huge sums of money to petrol stations and burning that petrol because you like the noise of burning petrol, you're probably not going to like an EV. But if you like not spending money at petrol stations, you're going to love your EV. In fact, I challenge you to find an EV driver that hates their EV. They're just better. They're just free. They're smooth. They perform. And as I've touched on, all the arguments are just childish, really. There's just, they are the future. Just accept it. Apparently there was a similar chain of thought when horse and buggies or steam engines were being replaced by cars. There was all this big stink about it. It's the same now. They're better. As I said, we've got no regrets whatsoever. It's brilliant. It's utterly brilliant. So if you're thinking about getting an EV, don't listen to the rubbish. As I said, unless you're one of those people with a specific need that you need that petrol, yeah, stick with it. But everyone else, you're just going to save so much money, and the price is going to come down, and the infrastructure is going to improve. But as I said, around town, infrastructure doesn't matter because you can charge at home for $0 if you've got solar, or almost nothing if you get off peak overnight. So yeah, I highly recommend it, and we're so glad that we've done it. And probably the only thing is that we're now part of that special smug EV owners club. We pull up at the chargers and you have a chat and laugh at the internal combustion engine users. So when everyone gets it, we won't be part of that little smug club. That's my only frustration with more EVs coming out and about. So thanks for your time.